Okay, up till now we've been looking at conditional statements a lot and various inferences you can make with them. We've seen how to make contrapositives, do modus tollens, modus ponens, etc. And I want to try and broaden our understanding of these statements a little bit more. In doing so, we're going to introduce the next major concept in deductive logic for the LSAT. Take a look at this. Here we have a conditional statement of the type that we're really used to working with, right? If something is a squid, if it's a squid, then it has bilateral symmetry. We know from our lesson on recognizing conditional statements that there's a ton of ways to say this same rule in plain English. I want to focus in on one of those ways right now. This gives us the same exact information, right? All squids have bilateral symmetry. That would tell you that anything that's a squid, then it's going to have bilateral symmetry. The same conditional relationship is latent in that statement. But another way to frame this is what's known as a universal quantifier. All of the conditional statements that we've looked at can be considered universal quantifiers. And what that means is they tell you that all of something that's within a certain domain, a certain universe, has some other characteristic. So anything that can be called a squid is guaranteed to then have this characteristic be within the domain of things with bilateral symmetry. So if it's in the domain of A, squids, then it's in the domain of B, bilateral symmetry. You may remember from working way back in school with Venn diagrams, right? So say we have a circle that is S, squids. Well, this rule tells us that all things that are squids fit into the domain of things that have bilateral symmetry. Everything that is a squid falls within this domain, this universe of bilateral symmetry. So this is another way to conceptualize these rules. And the reason I want to conceive of them like this right now is to compare them with the next type of statements that we're going to look at. These are quantifier statements that give us other information about domains, not necessarily the same as this all statement that we see. So we can think of conditional statements as always being all statements, right? They tell us that all of something in one domain is in another. The next series of statements we're going to look at might just tell you that some things within a given domain belong in another domain, or most things within a given domain belong in another domain. So let's look at these three statements here. This first one is a universal quantifier. It tells us that all of thing A, in this case squids, falls within the domain of thing B, bilateral symmetry. In contrast, and we'll look at more statements than this, but I just want a couple examples. This one, for example, just tells us that most felids, most cat-like species, are nocturnal. So if you were to draw out what the universe of felids looks like here, well, the majority of it is within this category, this other domain of nocturnal. Most felids are nocturnal. Apologies for the not perfect circles here. And then with this last one, we just know that there's some overlap between this domain and this domain right here. At least one whale, at least some, have defined teeth. So if we were to draw a circle that represented all the whales in the world, we would know that there's just at least some overlap. We're not sure how much with having defined teeth. So we're going to look at all of these types of statements in a lot more detail in the coming lessons, and you'll learn some inferences that you can do with them. For anyone who's sitting here and thinking, oh my God, we just spent so much time with conditional statements, how am I going to spend all that time learning about these other types of statements? Don't worry, this is not that hard a topic. Luckily, there's not too many inferences that you can make with these types of statements. And if you can visualize them in the terms that we've just looked at them here, as telling you that one domain falls to some degree into another, then you'll already be way ahead of the game in terms of working with these. Okay, read the text lesson for a review of the subject matter here, and then we'll be ready to look at some of these statements in more detail.